morning. So how many of you were at the Ferryman last night for last call? Hands up? Okay. Hey, it's a great honor to be with all of you. I love this city, this ancient city, this revolutionary city. Down every street, memory and history and song. But I'm talking to John the other day on the phone, and also Andrew. They said you can have as many slides as you want, you just had to get through them in 20 minutes. So there's a lot of ocean between here and America, and I intend to boil it with the following 722 slides. Okay? So I've been asked to talk about, I'm going to share some thoughts with you from my perspective anyway, and what I've seen around the United States, about the rise of smart cities, and also about a new way of governing that's actually bubbling up in the United States from cities. It was one of the happy returns I came home with after an otherwise frustrating presidential run, was just how much better most people in the United States feel about how their cities are governed, how effective their cities are, and their cities' willingness to embrace openness, transparency, and data in order to better serve its citizens. So let's go here, huh? Let me start with the first story that needs no reference. My clicker. No? Yeah. That's the story that needs no reference, okay? We reached an inflection point, humanity did, just a few years ago. And that inflection point is that now a majority of us live in cities. That's never happened before in the history of our human story as it goes with the story of the earth. And this happens at a time when we understand that how we live with the other living systems of the earth has put this biosphere under some tremendous stress and strain. So really, two urgent movements in human development have now joined and become one. The search for a more sustainable way to live with the other living systems of this planet, and the rise of cities, the movement of people to cities. Eckhart Tolle said that cleverness pursues its own little aims. Intelligence sees the larger whole in which all things are connected. In between cleverness and intelligence is the rise of the smart city. And with that, we can learn a lot from each other. This is a screenshot of a cool little site that Esri has called the Urban Observatory. You can match up different cities, and the three maps adjust to scale. This shot simply shows density, population density. Where it's brighter yellow, it's more dense. So that's New York on the left side, Boston, all at the same scale. And there's Dublin City. Not quite the urban density, huh? You think traffic's bad here, try it in Manhattan, all right? This is the Dublin dashboard. One of the hallmarks of the smart city is dashboards, right? Dashboards that not only face the mayor and the executive, but actually face to the true authority in a city, and that is the citizens and the voters. So the Dublin dashboard tells you a number of things, including a lot of stuff about water levels. In Boston, one of the more advanced dashboards, that's Marty Walsh up here, whose people are also from Connemara. His mother was an O'Malley, just as if we're doing 6 degrees to O'Malley's. And he will tell you there also about the dashboard that shows you potholes filled, graffiti removed, and how quickly they do these things. Another shot of the two dashboards. This is from Smart Dublin. I think Andrew or John sent me this one. This is how Smart Dublin, this website, seeks to describe what a smart city is, huh? Well, we're nothing without a Venn diagram, right? How to look smart at meetings. Draw a Venn diagram. Technology, innovation, collaboration, increased efficiency, sustainable development, open big data. But at the center of it is quality of life. Quality of life. And that's really at the heart of every definition that you find of a smart city the world over. I think there's an international mission statement for every mayor in every language. Every mayor in every language in every city wants to work to make their city cleaner, safer, healthier, better place for kids to grow up, better place for businesses to expand. While I have served as governor, I first cut my teeth as, really the job that defined me in public service was as mayor. If someone were to break into my bedroom in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., jump on my chest and stick a flashlight in my face and say, "Who are you?" I would say, "I'm Mayor Martin O'Malley of Baltimore." That's the perspective that I come at this from. So what is a smart city? Smart cities work to make themselves more inclusive, more prosperous, work to make themselves more sustainable and resilient, work to make themselves and their people more educated and highly skilled, work to better connect their citizens and their endeavors. They work to make their people more mobile so they can get to and from work and church and play, healthier and cleaner and more secure. And all of this requires that cities also be better governed. And it's the rising expectation of the Uber generation, right? That cities should embrace technology, be able to respond to individuals in individual ways. So let me talk a little bit about the rise of better governed cities, what that looks like. Many, many years ago, the great Robert F. Kennedy said that it is from the numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. That each time a man stands up for others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. So that was true 40 years ago when he said it, but it's not so true today. Why? Because the diverse acts of courage are no longer numberless. We can number all of them. Not only can we number them, we can also map them. We can also measure them and tell you how big the ripples need to be and how many there need to be in order to amount to a sort of tidal wave of change that leads to sustainable progress. There are a few technologies that have come together, have dovetailed, if you will, in the information age that's really advancing in big ways our ability as a rational, thinking, caring, self-governing people to manage moving things, to govern ourselves, to improve quality of life among us and between us in the most important place where we live, which is our home and our city. What I'm talking about are these. Belief space, our ability to model physical and environmental and our social interactions. The cloud and the Internet of Things. Let me explain what I mean. This is a screenshot from my iPad of what was my commute from North Baltimore, very congested area, down to Georgetown, where I was teaching a couple of semesters back. Now, if you lived in North Baltimore and you told my neighbors that you have to make this commute at 7 a.m., they would say, oh, you can't get there from here. But what would I do? I'd do the same thing that any of us would do, and you don't even think about it anymore, right? You pull out the trusty iPad, you plug in the address for Georgetown, and voila, magic. The route appears. Even better, a pleasant-sounding female voice emerges. I call her Mary. And Mary is never wrong about the road or the destination. And if suddenly there's an accident along the way, Mary tells me, a quicker route is available. And she's never wrong. And I take it, and I get there on time, huh? So belief space. In this case, it's the dimension of the map. But there's more than one dimension to that map because it's uplinked through the cloud and other data sources in kind of format-agnostic ways to tell you how to get from here to there. Well, what if the destination, instead of from Baltimore to Georgetown, were how do we eradicate childhood hunger in a state? How do we reduce violent crime? How do we make our city cleaner? How do we reduce the numbers of people that die from overdoses of drugs? You get the point. There is a new way of governing that's emerging all across cities throughout the United States and I think across the world. And if the old way was very often about command, control, hierarchy, controlling information at the top, the new way is fundamentally entrepreneurial. Ask the operative question, does it work or does it not? And if it works, let's do more of it. And if it doesn't, let's stop doing it and do things that work. It is collaborative. It is performance measured. It is interactive. And it requires from leaders a commitment to openness and transparency that perhaps our grandfather's politics would think is radical, but it's necessary. The great Shimon Peres, now of blessed memory, once said to me, in the information age, people know as much as their leaders. And usually they know it before their leaders. And that's what, if in the old days, information was held up top, command, control, hierarchy, bureaucracy, do it according to the rule of because I said so, all of that's being washed away by the information age. And the only place of situational advantage for a leader is not at the top of the pyramid, but in the center of that collaborative circle, the emerging truth. Bringing people back constantly to what the information, the reality, the dynamic of whatever ecosystem you're trying to affect in a positive way, how it's moving and how it's affected by the actions and the choices that we're making. It's really about shared understanding. And the powerful tools we now have of geospatial, the cloud, the Internet of Things, makes this possible in a way that can really transform organizations, can transform cities, and bottom line, deliver that quality of life that people expect, that they join in the full life of a community in order to achieve. It's all about solving problems, deploying effort to location, and repeating what works. Let me tell you a true story. When I was elected mayor of Baltimore in 1999, Baltimore had become the most violent, addicted, and abandoned city in America. And I was elected with one primary directive from the people, and that is make us safer. Bring us together, do whatever you need to do to make us safer. So we needed to find savings everywhere we could. We won an award from the Kennedy School at Harvard for an innovation in government called CityStat, a system of performance management and using these tools. We didn't do it to be clever. We did it to survive. We did it to find savings from wherever we could. And one of those places was our Department of Public Works, big behemoth of an organization. And in transition, I went to meet with the head of, the outgoing, I should say, head of Public Works, because the mayor has the authority to appoint new people, and that's what I promised to do. And so I went to see the outgoing director of Public Works. My predecessor, Mayor Schmoke, couldn't have been kinder in transition. And so I'm sitting with him, and having served on the city council, I knew that there was a lot of money that we spent on keeping the cars and the trucks on the road. So I asked Mr. Balog, I said, Mr. Balog, can you tell me something? How many cars and trucks does the city actually own? And he said, 6,000. And I said, 6,000? He said, 6,500. I said, 6,500? What is this, a quiz show? I don't know myself. I was hoping you would, since this is part of your responsibility. And he said, yeah, well, you know how in any organization there's some things that you just don't get on top of? We don't really know how many cars and trucks we own. Now, anybody else with more sense would have run like the Cowardly Lion in The Wizard of Oz down the hallway and jumped out the window. But that was the way it had always been. That was the old way of governing. And the old tenets of city government were these. See if they sound familiar to you across the ocean. If the mayor really wants to know, we can find out, but we'll have to pull all our people off their other jobs, and it'll take weeks. Second old tenet of city government. We'll get to that as soon as we can, but it'll take a few months because our budget was cut last year, implicitly by you jerk. Third tenet. These are kind of interchangeable. We can't change because this is the way we've always done it. Or we're already doing that. Or we tried that and it didn't work. Or any variation that ends with here, that won't work here. We're already doing that here. You don't understand how it works here. And the last one, I hope everyone forgets about this question before next year's city council budget hearings. Mark Morial, who was the mayor of New Orleans when I came in as a mayor, said to me, kid, if you ever want to hide something, make sure you put it in the city charter or the city budget because nobody ever reads either one. So we replaced these, learning from another city, New York and CompStat, and what they were doing, reduce violent crime in New York. We took those same tenets of CompStat and we applied it enterprise-wide to all of government, and we called them cities, and we called it CityStat. We put 311 on the front end for all city services, and voila. An award-winning innovation in government was born, and now virtually every major city in America has some sort of geospatial service delivery platform with 311, one phone number for all city services on the front end. And these are the tenets. Timely, accurate information shared by all, rapid deployment of resources, effective tactics and strategies, and relentless follow-up and assessment. In a 2-week rotation, 10 different departments with their command staff would come together with my command staff for the whole city. Solicitor, head of HR, head of finance, head of IT, and we'd have a conversation about what we were doing, whether it was working, and how we might make it work better. And it was to center people on that emerging truth, the map. Show me. Don't just tell me to do it. Don't tell me the answer is just more money. In an executive wheel of accountability and focus, we would have 1 hour to focus on the emerging reality, the emerging truth, and talk about the things we could unwind, the things we could change, or different tactics and strategies that could allow us to deliver better services. Here's the big one we had, crime. In the old way of governing, if we had 200 police officers, which we did, to deploy to the crime fight, the question was where to deploy them. Under the old way of governing, one way that some would say is fair, we could deploy them equally to the 6 different city council districts. Or we could look at another map that shows where people voted for me in the greatest number, and we could deploy them there. That would be another way of doing it. Or the third way is to look at the 2 pretty confined areas of our city where the greatest numbers of our citizens were being shot and robbed and mugged and killed, and we could deploy the police there. So that's what we did. And we put our city on a path for the biggest reduction in violent crime of any major city in America over the next 10 years. And that, ladies and gentlemen, this graph right here, that is the most beautiful sight in all of municipal government. That is a graph moving in the right direction. I have graphs that move in the wrong direction, but I haven't put them in the slideshow, John. 311, potholes. One of my predecessors accused our city administration of having no vision. We responded with the 48-hour pothole guarantee. And we actually hit it because we were already tracking it. We knew they were doing it in 53 hours. And every crew that hit it got a thank you note from the mayor. Lift up the leaders. Look at the emerging truth. Illegal dumping spots are what you call fly tipping, the Irish translation for illegal dumping. Fly tipping. Vacant houses. Boy, we have a lot of vacant houses in Baltimore. We suffered the greatest abandonment in the 30 years leading up to 1999 of any major city. I wish I could have brought some of them here to give to you. A lot of vacant houses. But we started figuring out where they are. We actually started boarding and cleaning them. Instead of pretending that someone was going to buy the tax lien when we published it every month, we started taking title ourselves to awaken the dead capital, to consolidate parcels so that development could come in. Here's a story from down under. Talk about smart cities. Here's something that's not smart, it's not clever, and it's not intelligent, and that is road cuts in cities, the bane of my existence. I hated this as mayor. You know what I'm talking about. City gives permission for a utility company, let's say water, to come and dig up the street. Everybody's inconvenienced for about a month. Awful traffic. They complete their water stuff. They cover it back up, repave it beautifully. And then the next month, the city gives a permit for somebody to come in and repair the gas line. The street gets torn up. Well, with GIS, with the map in Perth, they created something called Smart Planning Perth. These are men at work. It's a joke. Instead of cutting up the road 4 times, they figure out where people's capital plans are and capital needs. They cut it up once, and all the utilities get their work done at once, and then they pave it back over. Detroit, traffic counts. LA, transit stops. Houston, before the flood. Owner, renter, vacant. It's amazing what cities are doing with big data, data hubs, measuring performance, modeling belief space. You get the point. This is a slide I nicked from the LAPD, one of the best police departments in the United States right now. And they actually work to improve public trust at the same time they work to improve public safety. But this is from a slide that I nicked from Sean Malinowski, whose mom's people are from Offaly. And he said, this is how I describe the evolution that's taken place in our police department. He said, we've moved from being an organization where information was stovepiped to where information shared by all. An organization where we used to do things based on intuition or hunch, And instead, increasingly, we're making decisions based on evidence. And then these last two, which I want to go a little deeper on. An organization that responds to questions or calls for service or emergency service to an organization that deploys proactively based on alerts. Going from our ability to make pretty and nice-looking maps, which are always fun to look at, to our ability to do predictive analytics, to know what we know and actually to be able to do something about it in a proactive way. And that's what I wanted to touch on, these two, alerts and analytics. Dublin, solar dustbins. You've read about these? Yeah, that's pretty cool. They deploy 20% less of these than you currently have. And unlike the ones that overflow and drive people crazy, right? They don't come to pick up the dustbin that everybody's throwing their coffee cup and their trash in, and then it blows all over the street and looks awful. Instead, these are equipped with sensors. So they tell the people in charge where they're being filled, when they need to be emptied. The city saves money. The city's cleaner. Fewer dustbins out there, and fewer people are needed to keep dumping trash bins that maybe aren't full. It's a little example, but it really does demonstrate the Internet of Things, the sensors, the ability to model belief space, and improve quality of life. Here's one, shot spotter. It's audio sensors. They deploy the audio sensors, they triangulate, and they can tell you when gunshots are fired in an urban environment, and the police can deploy immediately to that spot and not wait until somebody's body hits the pavement before they go take the guns off the street. Pittsburgh, the engineer at Carnegie Mellon said to me, yeah, we're deploying sensors in bridges so that we can feel the pain that the bridge feels when it's structurally stressed. Singapore and other cities as well, deploying sensors to seniors. So if there's no motion in a senior's apartment, it alerts somebody to go knock on the door in case somebody's fallen down, broken their hip, can't get up, sort of thing. Pittsburgh's, this is in anticipation of the driverless cars. I suppose you could say that, from the first time you put streetlights on timers, that was a smart city solution. But now connecting the traffic signals by motion sensors so that they become a network sensor that responds to the flow of traffic and pedestrians and bikes even, instead of sending, a hose out across the road, count the number of flump-flumps, and then send Nick up in a bucket truck with a screwdriver, So juveniles violating curfew, especially if those juveniles are caught up in the drug trade and get shot when they're out on the streets at 2 a.m. Alerts and sensors. Here's one, mapping air pollution in San Francisco and Oakland. You get the point. Sensors and alerts. Let me touch on predictive analytics. This sounds like a joke. An astronomer and a housing commissioner meet in a bar in Baltimore. And they figure out that the same math that's used to tell the astronomer where stars are going to cluster can also be used to tell the housing commissioner where vacant houses are going to cluster. Predictive analytics. To understand what we already know and to actually be able to do something about it. This is Predpol from Los Angeles. LAPD asked Stanford if they could look at the last 10 years of crime data over a time-space continuum and a map and tell us, for an 8-hour shift in this area with 5 cars in it, where are the tiny little places, these little 500-foot by 500-foot squares where crime is most likely to happen in this 8-hour shift. And then they asked the officers, with windows rolled down, eyes open, ears open, the goal is to give us 81 quality minutes in these little red boxes. And it actually works. Predictive analytics. This is from New York Police Department. They do a running poll on people's phones, free apps, asking them 6 questions about the perception of crime in their neighborhood and their perception of police courtesy, professionalism, trust in policing. In our country, you can't improve policing without also improving how you police the police and therefore improve public trust. And then when the commanders meet every 2 weeks in ComStat, they can see whether they're shading towards greater trust or whether it's dipping. That too is a bit of a predictive analytic and a bit of an alert. using intelligent human beings with their phones and their opinions. Infant mortality. A lot of cities are getting a lot better on this, figuring out where are the moms that are at greatest risk and the babies that are at greatest risk, deploying earlier with the maternal health care and nutrition and those things. Cincinnati's doing an awesome job of that of late. In our state, we also use predictive analytics to do a better job on it. Here's a cool one. Allegheny County, also Pittsburgh, joins with the University of Auckland to figure out how to take the information we already know to intervene earlier in the lives of vulnerable families in ethical ways, not a black box of a secret algorithm, but to figure out where are the most vulnerable families and kids and how do we deploy the action early on when they're starting to shake until when they're living under a bridge someplace or the kids are taken out and put in foster care. Here's one from New Zealand. Kaikoura and Wellington earthquakes. 3D geospatial tools that monitored the last earthquake and how it affected the buildings and told them, showed them something that they hadn't fully appreciated before, which is the greater the distance of soil down to bedrock, the worse the shaking is for the building, which allows them to then model how future earthquakes are going to affect the city and make better decisions about planning and building codes. This is one from my home space, Chesapeake Bay, largest estuary in North America. In this case, using predictive analytics and what we already know to identify where the flow of nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment is coming into the streams and rivers of the Chesapeake Bay. Using the map to deploy a suite of 36 actions from cover crops to stormwater remediations to the best places to get the best bang for your buck, if you will, of reducing that pollution. Last year, the health of the Chesapeake Bay was the best it's been since 1985. That was after about 350 years of decline. Precision conservation, getting the right practices in the right places, whether it's urban or whether it's rural. This is gentrification rates across Philadelphia, using predictive analytics to tell you how quickly a neighborhood is gentrifying. And being able to anticipate what sort of actions need to happen, whether it's affordable housing or mobility, to keep your city, not only growing but also inclusive. So the bottom line, what does all of this mean? I believe that it means that cities are at the forefront of a really big evolution in self-governance. The ability in real time to manage moving things, the ability in real time to model our built and our natural environment, our actions and our interactions for the greater health, well-being, and the prosperity of all. This is exciting stuff, and it is happening in cities at a really, really critically important time for our planet. Thank God. Perhaps it's providence as the earth reaches cognition in us. Look, let me, being an American and being a guest in your country, and given what's going on in my country's politics, I would like to address the elephant in the room. The great Jesuit priest and paleontologist Teilhard de Chardin said that it is the law of all progress that it must pass through some periods of great instability. If you were to look at a map of the United States and the election returns, the map up at top is a geographic map. It shows you what the returns were by all of those square states and a lot of those squarish counties. And up here, it looks like it's a big sea of red across the continent actually voting for this candidate. But if you look at this map, this cartogram, it's adjusted by population, where people live. And the map of the United States, there's New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, Miami. It looks like a continent of blue bubbles with deep red spaces in between. And you see how it is that, that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. Huh? This is the movement. Urbanization in the United States is not going to stop any more than the generous, compassionate yearnings of the next generation of Americans is suddenly going to stop. These are movements in the right direction. These blue bubbles are places where people value public goods, public education, affordable housing, an inclusive economy, diversity, creativity. These are these blue bubbles. They are the places of innovation and creativity, of knowledge, of action and interaction, where people choose to live, as Exodus would say, not just free from oppression, but free in the context of community, among and with other people. And that's where we're headed. It's all about getting things done, isn't it? It's better results for a better quality of life. And the cool thing is, I think, we have never had a better ability to connect with one another in intelligent ways than we do today. Talk about sensors. We've got millions of them. They're human beings. They're all armed with more computing power than the Apollo mission had. And they care, and they're connected. None of that is a substitution for imagination, but it is a great enabler of imagination for the greater security, education, health, opportunity, sustainability, and jobs that we seek. There is a Native American proverb that I think is particularly poignant to speak to the future of cities and the future of this earth. And it is that the way we treat the earth affects all people, and how we treat one another is reflected in how we treat the earth. Thanks very much.